Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Erlangga Hartarto. Minister of Plantation, Industries and Commodities of Malaysia, Her Excellency Datuk Zuraida Kamarudin. Permanent Representative of the Republic of Indonesia to the United Nations in New York, His Excellency Armananta Kristiawan Nasir. Deputy Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the United Nations in New York, Mr. Azril Abdul Aziz. Global Head Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems, UNDP, Mr. Andrew Bowarnik. Director of Sustainability and Smallholders Development, CPOPC, Dr. Wicaksono Darmosarkoro. Executive Director of International Coconut Community, Ms. Jelfina Alo. Deputy Administrator, Operations Branch of the Philippines Authority, Department of Agriculture, Mr. Royal M. Rosales. Senior Manager, R&D and Sustainability, Malaysian Palm Oil Association, Ms. Shireen Xavier. Executive Director of Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, or CPOPC, Dr. Rizal Afandi Lukman. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good evening from Jakarta, Indonesia, and a warm welcome to the webinar on Catalyzing Actions for Sustainable Vegetable Oils in Support of SDG. First, we would like to extend our deepest appreciations and gratitudes to all of you joining us from wherever you are, from across the globe, different time zones. Thank you very much for participating this evening. My name is Rahmat Idris. It is my absolute delight to take part in this webinar that shines light on the importance of sustainability in vegetable oils productions and supply chain. It is indeed the right time to deliberate on this as the entire world is shifting and gearing towards a greener economy. Throughout the program this evening, we'll be hearing from some of the most esteemed speakers to get their insights, their takes on the matter. Commencing our program together this evening, allow me to invite welcoming remarks from the Permanent Representative of the Republic of Indonesia to the United Nations, joining us all the way from New York. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency Armananta Kristiawan Nasir. The screen is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pak Azril, Deputy Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the United Nations, Dr. Rizal Lukman, Executive Director of the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, CPOPC, distinguished speakers, colleagues, participants. Good morning from New York, and good afternoon and good evening for those joining us from Europe and from Asia, particularly in Indonesia and Malaysia. Let me firstly welcome all of you to this webinar on sustainable vegetable oil. I particularly appreciate those joining us physically in New York. I believe this is one of the earliest time for a side event during the ECOSOC HLPF. So I congratulate all of you for being here. This just shows your dedication to the issue of palm oil, to the issue of vegetable oil, and the importance you place on our discussion this morning. Vegetable oil in many countries is a key commodity for food security. Its wide uses is also an essential input for many industries. For many producers of vegetable oil, it is also an important contributor not only to the national economy, but also a key contributor for the attainment of the SDGs. The strategic importance of vegetable oil for many countries and industries requires that policy taken towards vegetable oil must be socially and economically and environmentally balanced. Colleagues and participants, COVID-19 has placed a great pressure on the supply and prices of vegetable oil. The situation has been further exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. The war has added new challenges and intensified the dynamic in the global trade, supply and demand of vegetable oil. Ukraine and Russia, as the two biggest producer of sunflower oil, produces over 50% of the global supply. The situation in Ukraine has greatly disrupted the supply of sunflower oils, particularly felt in the European market. This has also put pressure on the prices and supply of such a product such as palm oil. Therefore, it is important to ensure that there should be fair trade, commonly acceptable international standards and policies, including those related to sustainability for all vegetable oil. This will ensure that access for vegetable oil remains open, particularly in a dynamic situation such as today. Years of discriminative policies and practices against certain vegetable oil in some markets should therefore be eliminated. Colleagues and participants, the theme of our webinar today is Catalyzing Actions for Sustainable Vegetable Oil in Support for Sustainable Development Goals. The aim is to promote sustainability measures across vegetable oil from the perspective of governments, smallholders, as well as private sector. CPOPC will also be introducing and promoting the global framework principle for sustainable palm oil to the United Nations members. With this short remark, I hope that you will enjoy this webinar and have a productive discussion. I thank you.
Well, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Indonesia to the United Nations in New York, Your Excellency Armananta Kristiawan Nasir, thank you very much indeed for the warm welcoming remarks. And still joining us from New York, allow us now to invite yet another remarks from Deputy Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the United Nations in New York. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Azril Abdul Aziz. Please.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everybody. His Excellency Armananda Christian Nasir, the Permanent Representative of the Republic of Indonesia to the United Nations, Dr. Rizal Afandi Lukman, Executive Director, Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to all present physically and virtually today for supporting this important side event. I'm hopeful that outcomes of our deliberation today would address prevailing questions surrounding the sustainability of vegetable oils, particularly palm oil. Perhaps this event may be helpful to further advance the important and necessary discourse surrounding palm oil productivity and marketability, at the same time explore practical means and solutions to coherently address new and emerging challenges in the environmental, social, and development dimensions for palm oil producing countries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that vegetable oils will continue to be in demand, and thus ensuring that they are sustainably produced is the only way forward to safeguard its continuous demand. Apart from the daily uses, due to its natural properties and versatility, palm oil is crucial as a food ingredient. Its natural preservative effect, texture, and taste makes it widely used in the production of margarine, chocolate ice cream, soaps, and cosmetics. No other oils could emulate its unique traits. Due to its popularity and crucial use as a food ingredient, more questions have been raised on palm oil in recent years, be it on its production or the sustainability of its sources. To address this, Malaysia continues to ensure that its palm oil industry meets the highest standards of sustainability. Both Malaysia and Indonesia combined are the world's largest palm oil producers. Both have established certification standards. Malaysia established the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil Certification in 2015 within the palm oil industry to address questions surrounding environmental concerns and social impacts resulting from industry investments. Given the aspirations and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the introduction of a national certification mechanism is timely and well-placed, demonstrating strong commitment and earnest efforts to ensure that palm oil production is sustainable and adhere to environmental protection obligations. Earlier this year, the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries developed a global framework of principles of sustainable palm oil, which serves as a reference document across different certification schemes that are applied to palm oil production. The framework is introduced with the UN Sustainable Development Goals firmly set at the heart of its foundation. The 7 principles of the GFP-SPO, among others, relate to several key elements of the SDGs, Malaysia is confident that the crucial role of the GFP-SPO in ensuring that vegetable oils, such as palm oil, is able to meet global standards and demand in a sustainable, productive manner by adhering to SDGs principles. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, palm oil has become one of the main export commodities for countries that are endowed with a tropical climate like Malaysia. Its trade has made significant strides in alleviating poverty among the rural folk in my country. It has lifted the quality of life of our people, enabling them to gain better access to education and healthcare. Addressing the question of palm oil sustainability must take into account the varying national realities and levels of development of producing countries. Let us work together in strengthening understanding of one another. Let us harness the opportunity today to boost our collective effort for an enhanced and resilient sustainable vegetable oils industry. I thank you.
Well, Deputy Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the United Nations in New York, thank you very much, Mr. Azril Abdul Aziz, for the warm words of remarks. Thank you indeed. Participants, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the evening and our webinar tonight, we will see as enlightened by remarkable speeches, keynote remarks from two distinguished ministers representing the Republic of Indonesia and Malaysia to give us deeper insights into the matter. And it is now my distinct honor to invite the first keynote remarks from Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency Airlangga Hartarto.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Your Excellency Datuk Zuraida Kamarudin, Minister of Plantation, Industry and Commodities of Malaysia. Your Excellency Ambassador Armanata Nasir, Permanent Representative of the Republic Indonesia to the United Nations. Honorable Mr. Azril Abdul Aziz, Deputy Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the UN. Honorable Dr. Rizal Avandi Lukman, Executive Director of CPOPC. Honorable speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to convey my most sincere appreciation to all parties that have jointly organized today's webinar, especially the Government of Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Secretariat of Council of Palm Oil for Producing Countries, or CPOPC. This event is also made possible by the co-sponsorship of Philippines government and the international coconut community. Ladies and gentlemen, the main theme of this webinar, namely Catalyzing Action for Sustainable Vegetable Oil in support of the attainment of Sustainable Development Goals, is of critical importance, especially amidst the ongoing of food, energy, and financial crisis that we are facing today. High inflation, interest rate spikes, together with the surge of food and energy prices and disruption in the supply and trade of agriculture commodities, have indeed created enormous challenge on our common effort to meet the SDGs target by 2030. Amidst this crisis, ensuring availability, accessibility, and affordability of agriculture commodities in the global market, including vegetable oil, should become one of our main focus. Taking into account the growing global population and widespread use of vegetable oils in various industries, it is predicted that the size of global market for vegetables oil will increase from 199.1 million metric tons in 2020 to 258.4 million metric tons by 2026. As such, it is important to ensure the continuity of enough supply of vegetable oils to the global market so as to prevent further price volatility and shocks to the global economy. Distinguished participants, we also note that there is a growing demand and emphasis for agriculture commodities, including vegetable oil, to meet sustainable industry standards. In this regard, we continue to believe that common efforts to ensure sustainability in global vegetable oil market should be conducted in holistic and non-discriminatory manners. Furthermore, such efforts should broadly take into account international agreements such as an UN SDGs 2030, as well as Paris Agreement. We also need to create enabling environment, including through the provision of resources and skills to support smallholders in realizing sustainable production of commodities used to produce vegetable oils. Distinguished participants, taking into consideration the above-mentioned challenge, Indonesia aims not only to restore its economic condition before the pandemic, but also transforming the economy to become more greener, sustainable, and inclusive. With the objective in mind, as one of the world's main producer and exporter of vegetables oils, this includes palm oil and coconut oil, Indonesia continues to attach great importance of ensuring sustainability across its vegetable oil sectors through the following measures. First, Indonesia has implemented various regulatory frameworks and promote multi-stakeholder cooperation in vegetables oil sectors. In the case of palm oil, Indonesia has issued comprehensive policy framework that involve multi-stakeholders cooperations. In the coconut sectors, Indonesia also promote partnership with other countries to implement the use of eco-friendly smart farming on coconut plantation in order to increase productivity. Second, Indonesia is also focused on intensification of palm oil plantation, including through provision of support for smallholders to replace older crops, thus ensuring higher yield. Third, Indonesia is committed to accelerating the clean energy transition through biodiesel policy to achieve zero net emission. It is estimated that the use of B30 might potentially reduce greenhouse gas emission by 24.6 million tons of CO2. This will boost Indonesia's goal to achieve energy security and energy mix target of 20% by 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia will continue to promote the importance of sustainable agriculture and food system in various fora, including through G20 chairmanship and working with UK through the co-chairmanship of the FACT, Forest, Agriculture and Commodities Trade Dialogue. Furthermore, Indonesia is also committed to promoting and synergizing cooperation to ensure sustainability of vegetable oils across various relevant international organizations such as CPOPC and ICC. I am pleased, therefore, that in today's webinar we will learn more about CPOPC, Global Framework Partnership Principles of Sustainable Palm Oil, which may also serve as reference to the developing principle of sustainability, not only for palm oil, but also for other types of vegetables oils. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude my remark by the hope that this webinar can provide platform for building trust, establish common understanding on the importance of sustainable vegetables oils in the world. Let us redouble our effort to achieve SDGs and set our path toward resilient global community, including through the promotion and development of sustainable vegetable oils. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Your Excellency Erlangga Hartarto, Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Thank you very much indeed for the inspiring keynote speech, setting the path for our discussion this evening. Participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am now privileged to invite the second keynote speech from Minister of Plantation, Industries and Commodities of Malaysia. Joining us from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, we welcome Her Excellency Dato' Zuraida Kamarudin. Your Excellency, the screen is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalam wa ala ashrafil mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. His Excellency Erlangga Hartarto, Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. His Excellency Armanatha Kristiawan Nasir, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Indonesia to the United Nations in New York. Mr. Azril Abdul Aziz, Deputy Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the United Nations in New York. Dr. Rizal Afandi Lukman, Executive Director, Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, and representatives from Ministry of Plantation Industries and Commodities, Ministry of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, and Republic of Indonesia. Secretariat of CPOPC, good morning and welcome to the United Nations Economic and Social Council, UN ECOSOC High-Level Political Forum 2022. I'm glad to be part of this event and thank you for the opportunity given to deliver my speech this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I would like to extend my utmost appreciation to the Indonesian government for being the co-organizers of this event today. On the same note, I would also like to thank the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, CPOPC, for being the secretariat and coordinator between Malaysia and Indonesia. On behalf of the Ministry of Plantation Industries and Commodities, I fully support this initiative as it is crucial for the future development of the vegetable and palm oil industry, specifically in both countries. As we all know, HLPF is the central United Nations platform for us to follow up and review the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, at the global level. In this context, Malaysia has made significant progress in implementing these SDGs. Malaysia's SDG score has improved from 64.02 in 2000 to 70.33 in 2021, ranking us at the 73rd position among the 163 countries. Hence, this shows Malaysia's commitment and efforts in ensuring that these goals are achieved as planned in relation to environmental, social, and economic sustainability. In this regard, my ministry has formulated the National Agri-Commodity Policy 2021-2030, which will be the guiding document for the country's agri-commodity industries development. One of the main priorities that has been underscored in the policy is mainstreaming 17 SDGs, a pledge that Malaysia has made as part of our national development planning. As for the palm oil industry, the policy has outlined percentage planted areas certified sustainable and percentage meals certified under the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil (SPO) as the key indicators to measure our sustainability efforts for both upstream and downstream activities. Currently, 100% of the plantations and organized smallholders have been certified under the MSPO scheme. As for the mills, 97.85% of 456 mills has obtained the MSPO certification. In addition, Malaysia has also pledged to reduce the intensity of greenhouse gas emission across the economy by 45% in 2030. To uphold the initiative, MPIC has set targets with regards to annual reduction in GHG emissions from biodiesel and biogas usage. Hence, this shows MPIC's commitment in ensuring sustainability efforts in the palm oil industry. Ladies and gentlemen, with regards to sustainability, MPIC encourages industry-driven, responsible and good practices across the value chain, such as workers' rights and welfare, safety standards and certification compliance. The Ministry strongly believes that self-driven good practices is the best approach to perpetuate sustainability efforts. On the other hand, the Ministry has identified flagship programs under the National Agri-Commodity Policy, in particular the Mechanization and Automation Research Consortium of Palm Oil (MARCOP) program. We believe that mechanization in the palm oil sector provides advantages such as increasing workers' productivity, hastening fieldwork, and improving the sustainability of palm oil plantation operations. To achieve this goal, the National Palm Oil Board (POB), serving as the lead agency, is working together with the relevant stakeholders to identify suitable and mechanization and technologies that can be adopted by the industry. Hence, this can help eliminate unsustainable practices in the sector. In recent years, the global production and trade of vegetable oils continue to show a steady growth in line with the world's population growth. It is projected that the global vegetable oils market will increase from 199.1 million metric tons in 2020 to 258.4 million metric tons by 2026. Vegetable oils and fats have been instrumental in providing much needed resources to many industries, ranging from food and beverage to transportation. In addition, vegetable oils and fats also support the acceleration of economic recovery post-COVID-19, mainly through the HoReCa sectors, that is hotels, restaurants, and cafes. Although vegetable oils contribute positively in promoting economic recovery, there has been an increasing demand for sustainable vegetable oils across the supply chain. This aspect becomes more crucial as the global edible oils market is facing unprecedented disruption in vegetable oil supply due to various factors. In this context, Malaysia and Indonesia play an important role in ensuring that the global vegetable oil is not disrupted even further by supplying sufficient palm oil. Nevertheless, many palm oil producing countries are faced with numerous challenges nowadays, such as sustainability, deforestation, forced labor, and many others, mainly due to the increasing awareness from the consumers. Towards this end, both Malaysia and Indonesia established the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, CPOPC, which serves as a platform for cooperation and strengthening the palm oil industry. As the two countries understand that palm oil is an important component in the global food supply chain, we acknowledge that there are a few issues that we need to tackle, primarily those related to sustainable practices and trade impediments. Therefore, one of the main objectives of this council is to promote sustainable standards in the development of the palm oil industry. For your information, Malaysia and Indonesia have established our own mandatory sustainability standards, such as the Malaysia Palm Oil MSPO and the Indonesia Sustainable Palm Oil ISPO. To further strengthen sustainability efforts in palm oil production, CPOPC recently developed the Global Framework Principles of Sustainable Palm Oil. This framework can be used as a common reference across different certification schemes applied primarily to palm oil production, which anchors the UN SDGs as its base. Although GFP and SPO is developed through palm oil lenses to measure the contributions of palm oil toward achieving sustainable development, it can actually be used as the sustainability reference for other types of vegetable oil such as soybean, sunflower, rapeseed, and others. Therefore, it is important for ECOSOC HLPF to recognize the Global Principles of Framework for Sustainable Palm Oil GFP-SPO as a step forward in accepting palm oil as a sustainable vegetable oil in line with SDG principles. With this, we hope that concerns by certain countries such as the US and the EU on deforestation, forced labor, and climate change with regards to the palm oil industry can be addressed amicably. I hope this platform can also be used to clear all the misconceptions about the industry and, more importantly, to exchange expertise as well as ideas on sustainable practices in vegetable oils production. With that, I hope that today's session will be fruitful given the array of experts, speakers, and participants present. Have a productive day ahead, and thank you very much, and all the best to all of you participants of this conference. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Minister of Plantation, Industries and Commodities of Malaysia, Her Excellency Datuk Zuraida Kamarudin. Thank you very much indeed for the inspiring keynote speech. Participants, ladies and gentlemen, the two keynote speeches from both our minister from the Republic of Indonesia and also from Malaysia, in a way, have opened our eyes, allowing us now to delve deeper into the topic of our discussion in the webinar. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an amazing lineup of speakers that we just cannot wait to hear from. So first up, allow us now to invite the presentation from Global Head, Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems of UNDP, who will be speaking on strengthening sustainability of vegetable oil supply chain. You have 10 minutes. Mr. Andrew Bovarnik, please.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay. Well, anyway, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And thank you so much for those early welcoming and introductory speeches. At the UNDP, we're extremely pleased to be part of this panel. We have been working with the government of Indonesia for over 10 years, supporting their journey to sustainable palm oil, and also work with many other governments around the world, from Papua New Guinea to Africa with Liberia, and Latin America with Peru. And I'm very pleased to say we are about to start working more closely with the government of Malaysia as well, with funding from our partners like the GEF and the Swiss government. So with that, I'm very pleased to go into my presentation now. Will someone be moving the slides? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainability around particularly palm oil within the vegetable oil space. As we know, palm oil does have a significant ability to contribute to the SDGs, particularly as an engine of growth for smallholders who are producing palm oil, and also with regard to climate mitigation through biofuel. But there are also risks, and particularly, as has been mentioned by earlier speakers, the risk of land conversion is one that we really need to take into account when we consider achieving sustainability in palm oil. Please go ahead. So what we think is important is to look at the systems that influence the production and trade of palm oil. So not just to focus on the production piece, but also to look at all the different aspects globally of the system that influences palm oil. So looking at demand and responsible demand, both domestically and from key markets. Looking at what we call enabling sustainable transactions, looking at the finance and the financing of palm oil production, and then also, of course, looking at domestically in producing countries to strengthen farmer systems, farmer support systems, and looking at policy and land use planning. And within all of that, to really ensure the optimization of sharing knowledge and doing all of this work, and I'll be talking about this consistently, through multi-stakeholder action. And this was also referred to by our early speakers. So it's very useful to look at and think about the whole system holistically when we look at improving the sustainability of palm oil. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take each of the elements in turn and just touch on each of them a little bit more in depth. Of course, each of them are a whole area of work which the governments and other partners have been spending years on. But firstly, it is key to look at policy reform in producing countries. Governments such as Malaysia and Indonesia have shown that they are key to correcting market failures and really serving broader social interests through policy reform. Policies in palm oil, vegetable oil producing countries are key to producing efficient agriculture that is resilient and regenerative and can reduce negative environmental social impacts. And policy frameworks, of course, are key for creating the right incentives for behavior change and practice change. And with all of this policy reform, we believe it's very important to be formulating the policies with the stakeholders, with the beneficiaries, such as the farmers and the companies, so that the policies really do optimize benefit. Okay, next slide, please. Alongside a production policy, it is also important for countries and governments to be looking at land use planning. This is where governments at the national and subnational levels can really influence the diverse and competing interests for land and can help determine where land is suitable for agricultural production and where it needs to be left and conserved, particularly when we're looking and thinking about forests and peatlands and wetlands. And then within that, once deciding and allocating land for the different land uses, to really provide the regulations to ensure the social and environmental outcomes of the land use comes out as desired, and meeting and complying with those national policies, regulations, and standards, which we've also heard a lot about. And across all of this, what's really important is that the governments at national, subnational level really have the capacity, financial and technical, to be both implementing these reforms and also monitoring them to ensure that they are being enforced. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so alongside policy, what's obviously really key in countries is the support to farmers. And again, at UNDP, we believe the importance of taking a systemic approach. In Indonesia alone, we know there are 2 million smallholder farmers, and there are many more million smallholder farmers around the world. So it's very important to not just take isolated one-off approaches to train farmers here or there, but really develop stronger, more effective extension systems, and to do so with the private sector now. Many companies, many plantation companies have their own agronomists and extension officers. And so we believe it's really, we're in a time now where public and private sector need to come together and coordinate and blend and merge their respective expertise in supporting smallholder farmers. And again, to do that with the farmers, to co-create with the farmers what they need and to figure out how best to serve them. And we've developed at UNDP a farmer support toolkit, which is a multi-stakeholder approach to diagnosing and developing a more systemic farmer support. And we're already piloting this with district and subnational governments in Indonesia. And we look forward to applying this toolkit in other countries too. Okay, next slide. So as I said at the beginning, what's very important is also all the responsibility does not just fall and lie on the national producing country governments, but there are roles for the global markets and also for finance, because much of palm oil, vegetable oils are financed. And so we need to look at the whole financing and the purchasing of the palm oil, because there is also needed the responsibility to incorporate sustainability criteria into buying. So when we look at that, there's public procurement options. We can be looking at, we need to be looking at the market access, even issues such as long-term contracts, particularly to smallholders, to help incentivize them to take on the sustainability practices. More globally and internationally, we need to be supporting trade agreements, and the FACT dialogues are all about looking at suitable trade agreements and bringing transparency and traceability to these systems. And we look at financing. We need to be ensuring that all loans are including environmental, social outcomes. Markets, supply chains are taking into account pricing and premiums for sustainability. And also now, of course, with carbon markets and payments for ecosystem services, there are opportunities to also bring new market incentives to farmers, particularly smallholder farmers, to help them finance their shift towards sustainability. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Moving on quickly here. So across all of these elements of what we can consider the palm oil or the vegetable oil production and trade system, I've mentioned it several times, and it came up by our ministers' conversations. We believe that what's essential as an ingredient to the journey towards sustainability is to really include and invite all the stakeholders in the sector and the supply chain to the table and to have a voice at the table. And so multi-stakeholder collaboration across production, policy, finance, farmer support, and market regulations is really key, because this then allows us to hear the needs, the real needs, the on-the-ground reality needs of the farmers that we are looking to change, to have their practices change, and the companies and the governments, etc. And what we find is that this is where we can really help governments and stakeholders, because very often collaboration is not done robustly enough or rigorously enough. And we have been pioneering at UNDP methodologies and approaches to really ensure that all the right stakeholders are at the table and they're being heard. And we have this guidebook on the slide, a guide to effective collaborative action. And we really have been applying it with the government of Indonesia over the last 10 years. And it's been very exciting and important. And again, I look forward to bringing these approaches on multi-stakeholder collaboration and co-creation to others in the sector. Next slide. Okay, I'm coming towards the end of my presentation, but I did want to end with a couple real-life case studies. I'm just going to summarize a little bit what we have been doing with the government of Indonesia and Malaysia. So in Indonesia, we have helped the Indonesian government, driven by the Ministry of Coordinating Economic Affairs, to develop a national sustainable palm oil platform and a national sustainable palm oil action plan. The palm oil platform is called FOXP, which is Bahasa for sustainable palm oil. And it's been really quite impressive. The platform, again, driven by the Ministry of Coordinating Economic Affairs, has managed to coordinate over 14 different ministries in the government at the national level, and has also been setting up platforms at the subnational level. And in total, we have around 14 or 15 of these multi-stakeholder platforms operating across Indonesia, bringing together all the stakeholders in the space. And now there is an action plan that has been endorsed by the president and is under implementation by all of these ministries. And it really is helping provide a framework for the sustainability journey within the country. Thank you. Next slide. And in Malaysia, we are just getting engaged now over the last year, but Malaysia has been extremely active in the space of sustainable palm oil, and particularly in Sabah, in Borneo, one of the states in Malaysia. They have been advancing on a jurisdictional approach to sustainable palm oil and sustainable palm oil certification, and have set up their own multi-stakeholder platform for this jurisdictional approach, chaired by the Sabah Forestry Department and the Natural Resource Office, but bringing together all the stakeholders. And they really have been advancing. They've developed an action plan till 2025, and we are going to come in now and help them strengthen this multi-stakeholder piece to really improve the coordination and collaboration across partners. And we'll be doing that again with funding. We'll be working with the Global Environment Facility and with our partners, SECO, the Swiss government. And we're very excited to be joining this space and supporting the government of Sabah in this journey too. Thank you. Next slide. So with that, I want to wrap up. I'm wary of the time. Of course, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. And there is so much that has been done, and there is so much more to do to really optimize the efficiency and sustainability of these key commodities. So I'm excited to continue the journey, and UNDP is fully committed to working with our partners in Malaysia and Indonesia and all the other governments and countries that are both producing and will begin to produce palm oil. So with that, thank you very much, and I hand back to the organizers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew Bavarnik from UNDP, for such an illuminating presentations and for kicking off our series of presentations this evening. Thank you very much indeed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, from our very home in Indonesia here, we are delighted to invite the next presentation from the Director of Sustainability and Smallholders of CPOPC, who will be speaking on the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries' Global Framework Principles for Sustainable Palm Oil. Your presentation time is 10 minutes. We are delighted to present to you Dr. Wicaksono Darmo Sarkoro. The screen is yours, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished audience, good morning in New York and good evening in Jakarta, and also good afternoon in other places. First of all, I would like to thank for giving us a chance to introduce a framework established by CPOPC, the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, called Global Framework of Principles for Sustainable Palm Oil, GFP-SPO. Next slide, please. As you know and aware so far that palm oil is the key for palm oil producing countries in their economic growth acceleration, such as that in Indonesia and Malaysia, the founder of CPOPC, the Council. For your information, the membership of the Council is 2 countries at this moment, and in the coming members countries, or sometimes we call it observer countries, are 4. There are Colombia and Honduras in Southern and Central America, Ghana in Africa, in PNG, Papua New Guinea, in Asia-Pacific region. Let's back to the economic growth acceleration. Palm oil is the prime economic stimulator that increases the agribusiness development. Palm oil creates significant jobs, then becomes source of income for all people who engage with palm oil industry and activities. Palm oil acts as an area cruise control, since palm oil accelerates local area development through the investment of public facilities, such as roads, schools, health centers, things like that. Palm oil is also a source of materials internationally that generates profit, a significant national revenue, even in a struggling condition like that in COVID pandemic. Next slide, please. CPOPC believes that the benefit and profit generated from palm oil should not be the expense of people and other environment, and the environment where the ecosystem in it. Environment is one of the key in achieving sustainability, and for that, Indonesia and Malaysia have ISPO and MSPO, respectively, as the mandatory sustainable certification for palm oil production. ISPO, Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil, and MSPO, Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil, ensure that palm oil, as the world's most consumable oil, can be cultivated in sustainable ways. It is all important to mention that the recognition of sustainable palm oil comes beyond the producer. Palm oil has IPOS, ISCC, RSPO that represent consumer and multi-stakeholders perspective, but they share similar principles with ISPO and MSPO. IPOS is Indian Palm Oil Sustainability, ICC is International Sustainability and Carbon Certification, and RSPO, I think you're familiar with it. Next slide, please. As we can see in the right graph, the global demand for vegetable oils continue to increase. That is parallel with the growing population of the world. Hence, to feed the world, vegetable oil producers have responsibility to provide it with sustainable vegetable oil. Indonesia and Malaysia are pioneering in sustainability initiative through ISPO and MSPO. That's for palm oil. Under the Council, Indonesia and Malaysia established GFP-SPO that already mentioned above. The framework is a common sustainability system based on the UN SDG, with palm oil as the initial pilot. That can be a huge win for all in supporting vegetable oil production in a sustainable manner. Next slide, please. To ensure it is anchored in a common and well-recognized framework, GFP-SPO, the framework, is using Sustainable Development Goals as the base. Here are the 7 principles. I will go through. The first, development partnership for sustainable development through transparency and collaboration and include other vegetable oils. The second, uphold peace, justice, and strong institutions through compliance with laws and regulations. The third, invest in innovation and technology to drive the adoption of efficient and best management practices. The fourth, minimize the net impact to the environment and ecosystem through the efficient use of natural resources. The fifth, benefit workers and local communities by improving their living conditions and respecting their rights. The 6th, that's about smallholder, inclusiveness for smallholder and low-income consumers. And the 7th, this is also the important to make everything in place, commitment to continuous improvement. Next slide, please. When we established the framework, we also provided with 9 annexes, so we could read through them to understand more about the concept. The annexes are, the first, comparison of the framework and alignment to existing certification schemes. The second, SDG deep dive. That's how we anchor the principles to UN SDGs. The third, we provide the discussion also about the technology implementation. And to see a broader scope, we can go through the annex of high-level implementation and business model design. Also, discussion on extrapolation toward other vegetable oils to see the aspiration starting from palm oil to a global sustainability for vegetable oils. Engagement with smallholder, that's to elaborate on the importance of smallholder as a supply chain. The engagement with United Nations, and the last, the template for countries to form their new national certification schemes. Next slide, please. This is a very simple flowchart that shows how the principles were created. First of all, we are looking forward a common language, but not a new certificate scheme. And then establishment of common denominators across certificate scheme, at which focus on creation of productive partnership and not discriminating against specific vegetable oil. Also, identification of actionable ways in which the whole industry, it means producers and consumers, can improve productive sustainability. And the last, to ensure the opportunities for improvement are identified. So the principle and approaches are in the aspirations, and that's for discussion points. Next slide, please. How do the principles align across certification scheme? So we can see here that in the left, you can see that that is GFP-SPO with 7 principles, and in the right, you can see there are ISPO, MSPO, RSPO, and ISCC. Every single of principles of the GFP-SPO framework is basically aligned with the principle of all established certification schemes. For example, I could pick one, say GFP-SPO framework number 2. That's aligned with ISPO principle number 1, also with MSPO principle number 1 and 3, and also aligned with RFCO principle number 2. And the last, it is aligned with the 5th principle of ISCC. Thus, we can say that the idea of principle of the GFP-SPO is within the frameworks of the established certification schemes. So we are coming to the last slide, please. To close this presentation, I would like to mention that the first, CPOPC aspire that GFP-SPO will become a benchmark of sustainability for other vegetable oils and provide guidance and reference to new sustainable schemes. Once again, GFP-SPO is a reference, not a new certification scheme. Second, GFP-SPO is a common sustainability system based on SDGs, with palm oil as the starting point, which can be a solid foundation in supporting sustainable and productive vegetable oils. The last, it will allow for evaluation of vegetable oil production holistically rather than singling out certain commodity, country, or company. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Director of Sustainability and Smallholders of CPOPC, Dr. Wicaksono Darmo Sarkoro, for shedding the light on the global framework principles for sustainable palm oil. Participants, ladies and gentlemen, now let's delve deeper into the topic of measuring the impacts of sustainable coconut oil production and trade to achieve SDGs. This topic will be delivered by the Executive Director of International Coconut community. And now please welcome Ms. Jelfina Alo onto the screen.
Okay, thank you. Excellency Ministers and Permanent Representatives to the United Nations in New York, honorable dignitaries, respected resource speakers, distinguished organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen. It's my greatest honor to have an opportunity on behalf of 20 member countries of International Coconut Community to present the role of coconut oil production and trade on the achievement of SDG at this very important webinar. Next, please. Why coconut and coconut oil is important? Next. Coconut is justifiably called the tree of life. Every part of the tree is beneficial. More than 100 food and non-food products are available, including various derivative coconut products. Next, please. And coconut farms are mostly village-based smallholder in nature and operations. Over 95% of the global coconut palm population is owned by smallholder farmers. So smallholder farmers may become viable partners in coconut value chains. Next, please. Coconut is grown in an area of more than 12 million hectares. India, the Philippines, and Indonesia are the three major coconut producing countries, accounting of about 75% of the total area of coconut in the world. Next, please. And the global export trend of coconut products is increasing every year, as you can see on the screen. Next, please. And the global export value of $13.18 billion US, predominantly contributed by meat-based products and then water, shell, and husk. Coconut oil are the major products traded in the global market. Due to its widespread household use, trade and industry statistics on coconut products reflect only part of the actual importance of the coconut. Next, please. Market demand is increasing. However, coconut production tend to grow in the opposite direction. Next, please. And production hasn't fluctuated much in the last decade. These challenges could reduce the ability of the industry to fully benefit from the market opportunities. Now, the major coconut producing countries have been actively involved in replanting old and senile palm trees and improve productivity. Next, please. So what's the coconut oil? Next, please. Coconut oil can be differentiated according to how it's processed. If it's processed from fresh mature meat, it's called virgin coconut oil or VCO. While when it's processed from copra or dried meat, it's called coconut crude oil or CNO. When the oil is further refined, bleached, and deodorized, the oil is called RBD oil. Coconut oil is used as traditional resource for millennia, embedded and treasured in culture in the tropical world, and are consumed by many temperate countries. Next, please. Coconut oil is an important feedstock in the oleochemical industry. Many valuable products, from cosmetics to biofuel, can be produced from coconut oil. Next, please. And the global import of CNO grew at a CAGR of 2.1%. A slight decrease in import was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, please. And the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia are the major coconut oil producers and exported, accounted for more than 88% of the total CNO export. Next, please. Due to disruptive shortage and high cost of shipment during COVID-19, the total export of coconut oil from the three major exported countries in 2020 was reduced. The challenges were managed and showed a slightly increase on the export volume in 2021. Next. The upward trend in coconut oil prices in mid-2020 to date has slightly balanced the shortage of export volumes. Next. And the United States of America, Netherlands, Malaysia, Germany, and China are some of the top importers of coconut oil. Next. Coconut oil, like other seed oils and animal fats, is made up of natural compounds called fatty acid, which are among the most fundamental biochemicals found in all organisms. Different fats and oil have their characteristic fatty acid composition, and their fatty acid composition determine their health effects. Coconut oil is a predominantly saturated oil, so it is stable to oxidation and is therefore justifiably considered as a healthy frying oil. With a composition that is about 63% medium chain saturated, one can therefore classify coconut oil as medium chain saturated that has valuable health benefits. Coconut oil should be removed from the not recommended list. We should promote a balanced intake of different natural fats and oils because at high rates of consumption, the polyunsaturated fatty acid like omega-6 increase the risk of heart disease and metabolic disease. Next, please. The Philippines and Sri Lanka are the major VCO producers and exporters. Next, please. And despite some limitation during COVID-19 pandemic, demand and export of VCO was higher in 2020 than a year before due to scientifically proven of VCO as adjuvant therapy for COVID-19 based on study conducted by several universities and hospitals. Next, please. United States is one of the top importers of VCO with a demand grow at a CAGR of 1% since 2012 to 2021. Next, please. Women play an important role in the coconut sector from the upstream to the downstream of coconut oil production. Equal opportunities are given to men and women in all value chains. Next. Coconut oil fatty acids is an ideal feedstock of biofuel, including aviation fuel, to address global issues on non-renewable energy and to support global effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Next, please. As I said before, that over 95% of the global coconut palm population is owned by smallholder farmers. So most of the industries purchase raw materials from farmers. About 30 million farmers are fully engaged in coconut sectors, and more than 60 million households would be economically dependent on coconut through gainful employment on farms and at processing factories and involved in marketing activities across the globe. Next, please. Coconuts are still productive up to 60 years after planting and even more than 100 years. And every part of the coconut has a use and there is no waste. Activated carbon as a byproduct of coconut oil function in many industries, including in water purification. Coconut husk-based products as a byproduct also of coconut oil can replace plastic-based products, so it contributes to address global issue on non-degradable materials. Traceability of raw materials with validated information to the processing industries have been practiced for transparent, traceable, and sustainable products. Next, please. To make sure that on-farm production of raw material of coconut oil comply with good agronomic practices and eco-friendly practices, coconut-producing countries issue ministerial regulation on good agricultural practices, and some companies and institutions sign Coconut Charter as guidance for achieving sustainable coconut development. Next, please. Copra meal or copra cake is one of the marketable byproduct of coconut oil exported to many countries. Next, please. Coconut flour is one of the byproduct of virgin coconut oil processing. Coconut flour has a high dietary fiber content and a low glycemic index, making it an attractive choice for those who wish to restrict their carbohydrate intake. Next, please. Based on scientific studies, coconut contributes toward improving the above and below ground carbon stock, thus contributing to reduce greenhouse gas emission. A polyculture planting system with intercrops is also increase agrobiodiversity and demonstrate carbon sequestration. Please. This is a scientific journal published a study that I said before. Next, please. And coconut also support the achievement of SDG number 15. Most farmers are aware of using biocontrol agent and as an eco-friendly measure to control pests and diseases, and use biofertilizer to increase productivity. Another good agricultural practices is rainwater harvesting to address water scarcity in the plantation. Use of coconut shell as a byproduct of coconut oil to make charcoal briquettes in place of wood charcoal potentially slow ongoing deforestation. Next, please. Collective effort are needed by pooling the technical, financial, and policy support to optimize contribution of coconut oil production and trade in the achievement of sustainable development goals. Collaboration between coconut farmers organization, government and private sectors, and international organizations have been implemented and must be well maintained. Next, please. Although some improvements are still needed, coconut oil production and trade have contributed to the global effort in achieving sustainable development goals. Outlook of market for coconut oil is extremely positive. So we need strategic actions to sustain raw material availability to coconut oil production to achieve inclusive, sustainable, and resilient coconut sector. Thank you so much. Over to you.
All right, Executive Director of International Coconut Community, Ms. Jelfina Alo. Thank you very much indeed for the presentation and for giving us a clearer insights of how the coconut plantation can further contribute to the achieving of sustainable development goals. Thank you very much indeed. It was such a revelation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move over to the Philippines as we invite the presentation from Deputy Administrator, Operations Branch of the Philippines Coconut Authority from the Department of Agriculture, the Philippines. We are delighted to welcome onto the screen Mr. Roel M. Rosales, who will be speaking on the harnessing potentials of coconut oil for increasing the welfare of small-scale farmers. Mr. Roel Rosales, the screen is yours.
Thank you. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have the privilege to present the featured topic on harnessing the potentials of coconut oil for increasing the welfare of small-scale farmers. My presentation centers on the Philippine experience, which might as well be the experience of other coconut farmers in other coconut-producing countries. The coconut subsector of the Philippines is a major industry and accounts for about 3.6 million hectares of the cultivated area in the country. The industry provides source of income to a large sector of the rural families, and a significant number of people are engaged in coconut-based industries and trade, particularly coconut oil production. Next slide, please. Annually, about 15 billion nuts are produced from about 345 million bearing trees, which, however, have a very low productivity rate of only 4 metric ton in terms of nut production per hectare, and on a per tree basis of only 44 nut per tree per year compared to the other coconut-producing country. Next slide, please. The industry is predominantly a smallholders industry, wherein 51% are tenants and workers, and are living below the poverty threshold, owing mostly to low productivity of farms due to senility of trees and the lack of any interventions like absence of fertilizer applications and or intercropping for income augmentation. Next slide. Through the decades, the Philippine coconut utilization is geared mainly for export, wherein export share of total production has actually increased from 61% in 2009 to a hefty 74% in 2019. Next slide. And as such, the average growth rate of increase in export revenue for the Philippines from coconut is about 4% from 2015 to 2019. Next slide. The major product is coconut oil in the country, which is extracted from copra, the dried meat of the coconut. Oil may be refined or consumed directly as cooking oil or processed further to produce other high-value products. Next slide. The most intractable problem of the oil milling industry in the country has been the poor copra quality. Copra bound for oil mills commonly has high moisture content and is sometimes scratched, discolored, and contaminated with dirt and gravel. There is also no general price incentive mechanism for farmers producing good copra. Likewise, world coconut prices is also dependent and fluctuates with the general movement of prices of all vegetable oils and fats. Between the coconut farmers and the oil millers, copra usually goes through 3 or more marketing intermediaries. Next slide, please. The growing number of poor and the persistence of income inequality and the poor productivity growth are among the major challenges of the Philippines. The problem is aggravated by poor soil quality and the growing scarcity of land, which led to the increased number of landless and the continuous poor agricultural activities, which often lead to severe environmental degradation. Farmers often do not maximize the economic as well as the agronomic potential of their trees and often apply unsustainable agricultural practices. Next slide. And mindful of these concerns, the government over the years is seriously addressing the issues of low agricultural productivity and the pervasive rural poverty. So as seen on screen, last year, a coconut industry roadmap has been prepared in consultation with multiple stakeholders to track the strategic positioning of the Philippine coconut industry and to introduce major reforms and policy necessary to improve and develop the industry. Next slide. The programs and projects include sustainable planting and replanting of local cultivars, which is a strategic measure to ensure the preservation and diversity of the coconut population in the country. This is also complemented by a national program on hybridization, which will be implemented more widely over a good number of years. A limited program for fertilization and intercropping are also provided by the government. The promotion of village-level and small enterprises, which include the processing of coconut virgin oil and cooking oil, are also among the actively pursued programs among rural population and local enterprises. We also have a program on small oil palm development project, but this is rather small compared to the magnitude of the coconut industry in the Philippines. Next slide, please. Last year, a law was passed, a historical moment for the Philippine coconut industry, wherein the Coconut Farmers and Industry Trust Fund Act was passed to consolidate the benefits due to coconut farmers, especially the poor and the marginalized, and thereby ensure that the delivery to coconut farmers of a comprehensive package of programs on social protection, on productivity. This includes scholarship, medical assistance, credit, organizational development, infrastructure development, and other economic programs. The law also intends to ensure greater production, prioritizing the application of good agricultural practices, and thus pave the way for the modernization of the coconut industry. The assured funding and effectivity of the law is for 50 years. Next slide, please. There are also high prospects through the growing demand for coconut and coconut-based products in the world. For coconut oil, world production has been revised upward for the third semester of this year, mainly on account of the Philippines, whose production is up 14% for the year. Export of coconut oil from the Philippines and Indonesia have increased sharply this year. Furthermore, the private sector is seen as more and more committed to support sustainable coconut production and sourcing through sustainability criteria and standards. Next slide, please. We have a project partnership with GIZ on sustainable certified coconut production. This is in partnership with GIZ as well as the local government units in the Philippines and other government agencies. The project partnership is envisioned to be a game changer, which is to increase the incomes and economic self-sufficiency of smallholders coconut farmers in selected sites, supporting a sustainable certified coconut oil chain. We are increasing the coverage of the program this year. The project accomplishments showed 17% increase in incomes owing to increased yield, additional sustainability premium from oil mills, direct deliveries to oil mills, among others. Farmers are also trained and certified to Rainforest Alliance standards. Next slide. In closing, the Philippine government, in partnership with the different sector of government as well as the private sector, is moving forward to change the landscape for coconut sustainability and therefore contribute to ensure food security in the country. A lot needs to be done, and the journey for the Philippines has just started. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Roel M. Rosales, all the way from the Philippines, Deputy Administrator Operations Branch of the Philippines Coconut Authority from the Department of Agriculture, the Philippines. Is Filipinos would say it, salamat po. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on, last but definitely not least, to the final presentation. Let's have a listen on the role of private sector in realizing sustainable vegetable oils. This presentation is to be delivered by a senior manager, R&D and Sustainability Department of Malaysian Palm Oil Association. Please welcome onto the screen Ms. Shireen Xavier.
Thank you. A very good morning and evening to all our distinguished guests, fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be here today, and I'll be delivering my paper on the role of private sector in realizing sustainable vegetable oils. As I am from the Malaysian Palm Oil Association, I will be focusing my presentation more on the experience of the Malaysian palm oil industry towards realizing this goal. Next, please. Before I proceed, I will introduce you briefly to the Malaysian Palm Oil Association, or in short, MPOA. We were founded in 1999 as an umbrella entity to act as a single united voice for the Malaysian palm oil industry. We represent the interests of the industry in various statutory bodies, stakeholders, and external parties where we provide specific support services to our fellow member companies. MPOA is the leading association working with the stakeholders on various initiatives. Next slide, please. Today, MPOA represents 129 plantation companies, which account for about 1.7 million hectares, or 30% of total planted oil palm area in Malaysia. Next, please. MPOA is very much involved and well represented in various government bodies, and we closely engage with international bodies such as RSPO and ILO. The involvement of MPOA members is very important as the private sector represents the growers community in Malaysia. Next, please. This is just to say that the MSPO standards have been reviewed and was launched early this year, and MPOA was very much involved in the entire review process. We now have 5 principles of the MSPO standard. Next, please. The industry's commitment to sustainability is very much evident in the revised MSPO standard, as it is currently heavily anchored in with the UN SDGs. Next, please. And next slide, please. We now come to the question of what exactly is the role of the private sector in realizing sustainable palm oil. To answer that question, next slide, please. Let us first understand the global scenario of food security. By 2050, the world population will increase to 9.3 billion, which would mean that there will be an increase of 60% of global food demand. Next, please. This would mean that to feed these 9.3 billion people, it will be necessary to produce much more food in the next 40 years than was produced in the last 8,000 years. Next, please. So this brings us to the crucial question of how do we overcome this food crisis? Next slide, please. With the limitation that we face in terms of land expansion for agriculture, sustainability is the answer towards feeding the global communities in the future. To meet the 2050 demands, it is estimated that 150 million additional tons of vegetable oils and fats will be required each year. There is a need for continuity of sufficient vegetable oils in the market, as vegetable oils are essential for food security. Annual global production of palm oil is 74 million tons, And Malaysia produces around 19 million tons, of which plantations are mostly from the private sector and smallholders. To ensure there is continuity of sufficient supply, the vegetable oils need to embrace sustainable practices. Sustainable practices ensure continuity of supply without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own demands. To achieve this, let's look very briefly at the three pillars of sustainability, which is social, economic, and environment. Next, please. On the environment pillar, we see many initiatives by the Malaysian palm oil industry, started by the private sector, such as no zero burning policy, carbon and water footprints, a reduction of carbon and water footprints, biodiversity conservation, and such as establishment of wildlife corridors and others. There are many of these initiatives are above the requirements of current sustainability schemes, and many were initiated by the private sector before being a requirement. For the palm oil industry in Malaysia, the focus is not on greenfield expansion, but rather towards enhancing yield with the existing land bank using sustainability as the yardstick. Next, please. Being a labor-intensive industry, as responsible employers, the welfare of workers are of topmost priority. Much initiatives are focused on the welfare of workers as well as the surrounding communities. These amenities are provided to ensure that workers are comfortable with their working and living environment. Next, please. Moving on to the economic pillar of sustainability, the palm oil industry has significantly contributed to the eradication of poverty in many communities. There are also many industries related to palm oil that have been able to provide surrounding communities with better opportunities. These improvements in livelihood for the surrounding communities are achieved mainly by providing better employment aspects and education. Over the years, there have been advancements in the R&D from the private sector that has contributed towards the betterment of the industry. The private sector continuously invests in R&D for the growth and innovations which add value to the palm oil sector in terms of breeding programs, adaptations of green technologies, minimizing our carbon and water footprint, and much more. R&D on genome studies from the private sector have produced improved planting materials with increased yield potential. With improved economic gains, the private sector has also been able to upgrade operations in the industry by upgrading mill facilities with the adaptation of green technologies. This is in line with the GFP-SPO Principle 3 on innovation and technology. And of course, the industry is also able to contribute back to the community through its various CSR initiatives. Next slide, please. Sustainability runs across the supply chain, and it is the responsibility of every stakeholder right up to the consumer. We need to understand that the private sector also encompasses other entities such as consumer good manufacturers, retailers, and others. When it comes to supply, there has to be matching demand. When sufficient supply of CSPO is produced, there needs to be sufficient demand for CSPO. This is where the other entities of the private sector come in, which brings us to the shared responsibility element of sustainability. Next, please. The responsibility of sustainable production of palm oil must not only fall on the shoulders of growers, but it is a joint effort of all stakeholders are needed to realize this. It is a concerted effort. We need to work hand in hand with all along the supply chain. When there is raw sustainably produced materials available, there needs to be responsible procurement of these materials. Next, please. Sustainability is always dynamic. The private sector is very much committed to sustainable practices in its production of palm oil and in improving its efforts. As sustainability is a concerted effort, the private companies have proven to have taken up an approach to be sustainably oriented companies and ensured that it is not only the government's responsibilities. Private sector is further supported by the government agencies such as MPOB, which complement the research activities for further enhancement. All these initiatives by the private sector show they are committed to sustainability, as it makes good business sense to embrace sustainability. Though it may seem as a tall order initially, sustainability ensures business as a long term. Palm oil is a 100-year industry, and we need palm oil to be a long-term business to ensure global food security. And the private sector is very much committed towards fulfilling this challenge of meeting the global food demands and to ensure long-term business continuity. As mentioned earlier by Her Excellency Datuk Zuraida Kamarudin, self-driven initiatives are the best approach. So with this, I would like to say that the private sector is much committed towards continuous improvement. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you for giving me your time.
All right, Ms. Shireen Xavier there from the Malaysian Palm Oil Association. Thank you very much for the presentation and for also concluding our string of presentations for this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, we've almost come to the end of our webinar this evening. And to sort of cap things off and provide us with highlights of the entire deliberations, allow us now to invite the closing remarks from Executive Director of Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries. From Jakarta, Indonesia, we welcome Dr. Rizal Afandi Lukman. Please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Excellencies, Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs Indonesia, Mr. Erlangga Hartarto, Minister of Plantation Industries as Commodity Malaysia, Datuk Zuraida Kamarudin, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Indonesia to the United Nations in New York, Mr. Almanata Kristiawan Nasir, Deputy Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the United Nations in New York, Mr. Azril Abdul Aziz, distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored and pleased to follow the discussion for the past hour, as I found that there are many thought-provoking points raised by the panelists today. Of many important points, I underline that we are all in agreement that vegetable oils need to be continuously promoted as they contribute to the attainment and are in line with the core spirit of the SDGs. Today's webinar, which is held on 11 July, coincides with World Population Day. The World Clock Population alerts us that the current world population has reached almost 8 billion people. The United Nations estimates that the world population will increase to around 8.5 billion in 2030 and 9.7 billion in 2050. How does this relate to vegetable oils? The global consumption of vegetable oils hits 210.3 million tons throughout 2021-2022. The world demand for vegetable oil is projected to expand by 270 million tons by 2030 and becoming 310 million tons by 2050. Producing and consuming countries of vegetable oils are sharing a common responsibility to tackle the challenges of the world rising demand for vegetable oils by building a sustainable supply chain. This will be attained if we work together in partnerships through a common framework of sustainability. As the Executive Director of CPOPC, I wish to inform you that we have taken the liberty to establish the global framework of Principle for Sustainable Palm Oil, which was adopted in 2021. Through this framework of principles as the primary contributor to global palm oil supply, CPOPC highlights that palm oil can essentially support countries to reach their SDGs commitment by 2030. Furthermore, the framework may serve as a pilot global sustainability reference for all vegetable oils. I'm also pleased to inform this meeting that through a series of events, CPOPC has engaged palm oil producing countries as well as UN agencies to disseminate the value of the principles and I welcome their positive gestures. As the head of the Secretariat, it is my utmost responsibility to ensure that palm oil producers and consumers, as well as other stakeholders, are fully aware of the significant socio-economic impact of the palm oil sector on sustainability and community development. In today's global environment, where challenges are characterized by 5 Cs, namely COVID, climate change, conflict, commodity prices hikes, and cost of living. And food and energy security is at stake. Vegetable oils, in particular palm oil, can be an alternative source for the global community's resilience in addressing those challenges. It is proven that palm oil prices are much more affordable. We are more efficient in terms of land use for production, and we help the economies of the smallholders, thus instrumental to address the poverty, especially in the producing countries. With the framework of principle, as I previously mentioned, we once again demonstrate our strong and unceasing commitment to global sustainability. Finally, CPOPC hopes that this framework can be globally considered as the foundation for the establishment of sustainable vegetable oils platform. CPOPC stands ready to engage with you in realizing your commitment toward global sustainable development, because together we are stronger. Thank you very much.
All right, Executive Director of Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, Dr. Rizal Afandi Lukman. Thank you for the closing remarks. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the end of our webinar on catalyzing actions for sustainable vegetable oils in support of SDGs. At the end here, we'd like to express and extend our sincere gratitudes to all of our esteemed speakers. Thank you for your presentations and your in-depth perspectives on the matter. And most importantly, thank you to all of our participants out there joining us from wherever you are, from across the globe, from different time zones. Thank you very much indeed. And we sincerely hope that we can meet you in person for future deliberations. And just a few announcements, since we're not going to have any question and answer sessions. For those of you, should you have some burning questions on the matter, please find the contacts, or rather the emails of our speakers right there over on the screen, and send over your questions to each respective speaker. As for some of the questions that have been written in the Q&A tab, we will compile them and forward them over to respective speaker as well. So look forward for the responses. And ladies and gentlemen, CPOPC Secretariat has published the digital and printed version of the Global Framework of Principles for Sustainable Palm Oil. You may read it online or download the ebook at CPOPC website. Go to the resource page and click the subpage of GFP-SPO. The link will then take you to the flipbook of GFP-SPO. And that's it from me. I'm Rahmat Idris. It's been a great pleasure from Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you and good night, everyone.